Usually when we talk about a window of opportunity, we kind of imagine something just slowly, inevitably sliding shut, like standing on a train platform at 3:01 p.m. when your ticket clearly said 3.0,
Right. Yeah.
and you just watch the doors close, the train pulls away, and you're just stuck there on the platform with all your luggage.
It's a very unforgiving way to look at time, really. I
Yeah.
mean, you're either inside that window or you've just missed the ride completely.
Yeah, exactly. And if you are listening to this, I would bet honestly that you have felt that exact same way about learning a new language. There's this incredibly pervasive feeling that because you aren't a toddler anymore,
Oh, absolutely.
because your brain isn't this soft sponge absorbing grammar rules while you like play with blocks, that the window has closed, it's locked, and you're just doomed to failure.
Well, language anxiety is, I mean, it's one of the most common, deeply rooted fears adults have when they try to learn something new. We carry this cultural baggage that our brains are just too old, too rigid, and honestly just too set in their ways to take on an entirely new linguistic system.
Right. Well, today we're going to completely dismantle that idea. Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to step right into the mind of a polyglot, tear down the frankly toxic myths surrounding adult language learning, and show you why your adult brain is actually a wildly powerful language learning machine.
Yeah, and to do that, we are looking at some incredible source material today. Specifically, the insights from cognitive scientists Richard Roberts and Roger Cruz in their book, Becoming Fluent.
Such a good book.
It really is. And we're also weaving in the practical applications developed by polyglots like Jimmy Mello and the Mello method. The fundamental shift here, the big takeaway, is looking at language not as this pile of flashcards you have to suffer through, but really looking at it through the lens of cognitive science.
Right. So it's about perception.
It's exactly perception, habit formation, and learning how to leverage the mental tools you already possess, but probably don't even know you have.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because before we start building these new cognitive habits, we really need to demolish the faulty foundation, I think. Why does a capable, intelligent adult feel so utterly defeated the second they try to, put together a simple sentence in Spanish or Korean or German?
I mean, it starts with the most persistent myth out there, which is the belief that children are inherently biologically better at learning languages than adults.
I mean, I'll play devil's advocate here for a second. It certainly looks that way, right?
Sure.
Like you drop a 5-year-old in a school in France, and a year later they're arguing over the rules of a playground game in perfect Parisian French.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, their parents are sweating, struggling to just ask for the check at a restaurant.
Right. It definitely looks like magic on the surface. But
Yeah.
when researchers actually isolate the variables, children really only have two distinct advantages over adults.
Wait, only 2?
Just two. The first is physiological. A child's vocal tract and their auditory processing systems are still developing, making them highly malleable. This gives them the physical ability to acquire a zero accent, assuming they're immersed in the language.
Okay, so they have flexible vocal cords. What is the second advantage then?
A complete and total lack of language anxiety.
They just don't have an ego to bruise yet.
Precisely. I mean, a 5-year-old is not burdened by the self-defeating thought that they look stupid when they mispronounce a word. They shout the wrong word until someone finally hands them the toy they want.
That's so true.
But if we move past pronunciation and lack of embarrassment, adults are vastly superior learners in almost every other metric. I mean, adults have a massive existing vocabulary size, the capacity for abstract conceptual thinking, and a grasp of complex grammar that children simply do not possess.
Which brings up a really interesting friction point, I think, because we observe children picking up language without studying. The entire commercial language industry often pushes this idea of pure learning. You know the pitch, right?
Oh yeah, learn like a child.
Exactly. Learn like a child. Don't translate in your head. Just absorb the language naturally.
And for an adult, trying to learn purely through immersion without translation is a recipe for massive crushing frustration. The adult brain and the child brain are fundamentally different operating systems at this point.
The analogy that came to mind while looking through the source material is this: trying to learn like a child when you have an adult brain is like an experienced master carpenter trying to build a house using only plastic toy blocks, just because that is how kids learn to stack.
Yes.
You have spent decades acquiring these highly sophisticated cognitive tools. Why on earth would you throw them away and pretend you are starting from absolute zero?
That is a brilliant way to frame it, really. The Mello method and cognitive scientists agree that telling an adult to never translate from their first language is just absurd advice.
It makes no sense.
Think about it mechanically. If an English speaker is learning Portuguese and they come across the word insidioso, many traditional immersion programs would tell them to trip and learn that word purely in Portuguese, from context, without thinking of English at all.
But I already know the English word insidious. I know it means something harmful that spreads slowly and subtly. I already understand that abstract concept perfectly.
Exactly. You don't need to relearn the concept of creeping harm. You just need to map a slightly new sound onto a concept you already fully grasp. Cognitive scientists call this positive knowledge transfer.
Positive knowledge transfer.
Right. Trying to artificially suppress your native language deprives you of one of your greatest cognitive accomplishments, which is your existing fluency and world knowledge.
Okay, so if we aren't supposed to throw away our master carpenter tools, what exactly are they? Like, what is my adult brain doing right now that a child's brain just can't do?
Let's start with top-down processing. This is your brain's ability to use your vast world knowledge to make sense of incomplete, messy data.
Walk me through how that actually works. What is the difference between bottom-up and top-down?
Well, let's use reading a mystery novel as an example. Bottom-up processing is the raw data input. It's your eyes looking at the page, decoding the shapes of the letters, matching those shapes to sounds, and then combining those sounds into words. It's building from the ground up.
Man, that sounds exhausting.
Which is why a child reads so slowly. But top-down processing is what an adult brings to the table. You know the tropes of a mystery novel. You understand human motivation, greed, and deception.
Right, I know who the killer usually is.
Exactly. So if a sentence has a smudge over a word, you don't need to decode the letters. You use your overarching knowledge of the story to instantly guess the missing word. You are processing from the top down.
Ah, okay. So when I am listening to a native speaker firing off rapid Spanish or German, I am not going to catch every single syllable. But because I'm an adult, I can read their facial expressions, I understand the context of being in a coffee shop, and I can use top-down processing to just fill in the blanks.
Yes, and we combine that with another adult superpower, metacognition. Literally, thinking about thinking.
Yeah.
And specifically metalinguistics, which is knowing how language functions socially. You already understand the concept of sarcasm. You understand metaphors. You understand politeness routines.
Right. If I am at a dinner party and someone says, wow, it's getting a bit chilly in here, I know they aren't just making a meteorological observation. They are politely asking me to close the window.
A child doesn't grasp that nuance, but you do. You don't have to relearn the complex social dynamics of human interaction. You just have to learn your target language's specific version of them.
This leads to something that completely flips standard language advice on its head, honestly. We are always told to seek out native speakers. Every language app pairs you with a native speaker. But based on these adult cognitive skills, the book argues that learning from a native speaker is often a terrible approach.
It goes entirely against conventional wisdom, doesn't it? A native speaker certainly knows what sounds right. But if you ask them why a certain phrasing is used, or why a grammatical rule functions the way it does, they usually can't tell you.
Because they just know it.
Right. They absorbed it unconsciously when they were 3 years old. They never had to think about the mechanics.
The source material uses this Mount Everest analogy that I think perfectly illustrates this. If you are a novice climber trying to summit Mount Everest, you do not want a guide who is magically born at the peak, who has just lived at the summit their whole life, and is shouting directions down at you from the clouds.
Right. They have no idea how to climb it.
Exactly. You want a Sherpa. You want someone who has actually climbed the treacherous path, who knows where the ice is thin, and who knows exactly how hard the ascent is.
And in language learning, your Sherpa is a highly fluent non-native speaker. This is a core philosophy for polyglots, by the way. A teacher who learned the target language as an adult knows exactly where the cognitive traps are.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
They know why English speakers always mess up a specific French vowel, or why German sentence structure feels completely backward to us. Because they had to wrestle with those exact same frustrations. They had to build the bridge so they can hand you the blueprints.
Okay, I love the idea of the language Sherpa. I understand positive knowledge transfer. But let's get into the harsh reality of the mechanics here. How do I actually get the vocabulary to stick in my brain? Because honestly, I walk into my kitchen sometimes and completely forget why I opened the refrigerator.
Oh, we all do that.
My working memory just feels like a leaky bucket sometimes.
That is a very real frustration. And
Yeah.
it's exactly why traditional rote memorization is so punishing for adults. Staring at flashcards or trying to parrot back long, unnatural dialogue phrases heavily taxes something called the central executive.
What is the central executive?
Think of it as a very stressed out traffic cop in the middle of your brain's working memory. It directs attention, organizes incoming information, and decides what goes into long-term storage and what gets discarded. As we age, that traffic cop gets a little less efficient at handling high-volume, rapid-fire traffic. If you try to memorize a list of 30 random vocabulary words through sheer repetition, you are sending 100 cars into the intersection at once. The central executive gets overwhelmed, and the information just crashes and burns.
So if flashcards and pure repetition are out, what is the alternative? Do I just stare at a German dictionary and hope it magically sinks in?
The alternative is deep processing. Instead of shallow repetition, you force your brain to meaningfully engage with the word. You have to weave it into the web of things you already know.
How so?
Take the German word Schadenfreude. Instead of just repeating it 20 times, you analyze it. Schaden means harm or damage. Freude means joy. Then, you anchor it to a personal memory. You think about a specific time you felt a twinge of pleasure at someone else's minor misfortune, like seeing someone who cut you off in traffic get pulled over.
Oh, I'm attaching the new word to an existing emotional anchor. I'm carpooling through that busy intersection instead of sending a single, unattached car.
Exactly. But let's address the elephant in the room. Even with deep processing, you are going to forget things, and that feels like failure. But cognitive science looks at forgetting very differently. Back in the 1880s, a researcher named Hermann Ebbinghaus wanted to study memory mechanically without the interference of top-down processing or meaning.
Wait, how do you study memory without meaning?
He created thousands of nonsense syllables, words like bath, zoop, and toll. He would sit in a room with a metronome and force himself to memorize these meaningless lists, essentially torturing his own central executive for 2 years.
2 years? That sounds miserable. What did he even find?
He mapped out the famous forgetting curve, showing how rapidly we lose new information. But he also discovered a profoundly encouraging concept called savings. Let's say it took Ebbinghaus 1 hour to perfectly memorize a list of nonsense syllables today. A month later, he tests himself and realizes he has completely forgotten them. Zero conscious recall.
The leaky bucket strikes again.
Right. But here is the catch. When he sat down to relearn that exact same list, it didn't take him an hour. It only took him, say, 45 minutes. That 15-minute difference, that 25% reduction in effort, is the savings.
Wow.
It proved that the memory was not actually gone. It was still physically present in his long-term storage. The pathway just needed to be dusted off.
Yeah, so if someone listening to this took 4 years of high school French 20 years ago, and they swear they don't remember a single word.
They were wrong. The knowledge isn't gone, it's dormant. The time it will take them to relearn French will be drastically shorter than someone starting from absolute scratch. Which leads to how we actually build a study routine using a concept called the permastore.
Permastore. Like permafrost, but for memories.
Precisely. A researcher named Harry Barrick conducted a fascinating study where he tested people on their high school Spanish up to 50 years after they took the class. He found that certain words had entered a permastore state. They were essentially locked into the brain's hard drive for decades without any practice.
So how do we get words into the permastore? Like, what is the actionable step for the listener tomorrow morning?
It requires something called distributed practice. Instead of cramming for 3 hours on a Sunday, you study for 20 minutes a day. And you strategically space out the review of words over weeks and months. You overlearn the material slowly.
Ah, so it's about signaling to the brain, hey, I keep encountering this concept every few days. It must be important for my survival. Better put it in the vault.
That is exactly the mechanism.
Yeah.
But I want to prepare you for a very specific type of frustration that happens even when your permastore is full. Have you ever been in a conversation, you know the exact word you want to use, you can almost see the shape of it in your mind, but you just cannot physically spit it out?
The tip of the tongue state. Yes. And when you're speaking a foreign language, hitting that wall feels humiliating. It feels like your brain is actively breaking down in front of the other person.
It does feel awful. But cognitive scientists have completely reframed this. Researchers Brown and McNeil induced these tip-of-the-tongue, or TOT states, in Harvard undergraduates by giving them dictionary definitions of obscure words.
So even 20-year-old Ivy League students experience this brain glitch.
Constantly. And what they found is that even when the student couldn't produce the word, they could tell the researchers what letter the word started with or how many syllables it had.
Because the word is in there.
Exactly. A TOT state is not a sign of a failing memory. It is the exact opposite. It is proof of a highly robust active memory network searching for an item. The filing cabinet isn't empty. The clerk is just looking in the wrong folder.
That's a great way to think about it.
When you hit a TOT state, you shouldn't panic. You just have to be patient, relax, and let your cognitive network finish its search.
That is incredibly reassuring. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit. I am using top-down processing. I'm taking Jimmy Mello's advice and using a language Sherpa. I'm using distributed practice to fill my permastore, and I am not panicking when a word gets stuck on the tip of my tongue.
Right.
So I have the vocabulary and I have the grammar. So why might a native speaker still look at me like I am an alien?
Because language is not a mathematical equation where vocabulary plus grammar equals fluency. That brings us to pragmatics, the social use of language.
The difference between being technically accurate and culturally appropriate.
Exactly. As adults learn, they build what's called an interlanguage. It's a personal, hybrid version of the target language. But very often, adults get stuck in a good enough phase. Their grammar isn't perfect, but they are perfectly intelligible. So native speakers stop correcting them. This plateau is called fossilization.
Right, because it is incredibly socially awkward to correct a 40-year-old who just successfully ordered a train ticket, even if they use slightly clunky phrasing.
To push past that fossilization, you have to master pragmatics. The philosopher Paul Grice proposed something called the cooperative principle. He argued that all conversation relies on 4 hidden maxims. We expect people to be truthful, informative, relevant, and clear.
But nobody actually talks like a robot, perfectly fulfilling those 4 rules.
And that is the secret to pragmatics. True fluency is knowing how to flout or intentionally break those maxims to convey deeper meaning. If I ask you how a blind date went, you say, well, the restaurant had nice napkins. You just broke the maxims of being informative and relevant.
But by breaking the rule, I perfectly communicated to you that the date was an absolute disaster
Sure.
without having to say it directly.
Precisely. And every culture flouts these maxims differently. Take the use of silence. In America, we are culturally conditioned to view silence in a conversation as a failure. We will break the maxim of relevance just to fill the dead air.
Oh, completely. If there is a 3-second pause at a dinner party, I am immediately commenting on someone's wallpaper. I can't handle it.
But if you take that American need to fill silence into a high-context culture like Japan, you aren't just going to be seen as lacking fluency. You are going to be perceived as rude, erratic, or untrustworthy. In many cultures, applause is a sign of respect. It shows you are carefully considering the weight of what the other person just said. Your perfect grammar won't save you if your pragmatics are offensive.
That is fascinating, but it raises a bigger question about the end goal here. Shouldn't my ultimate objective as a listener be to achieve 0 accent? To mimic the native culture so perfectly that I am indistinguishable from someone born there?
Actually, cognitive science and expert polyglots push back hard on that idea. Trying to completely erase your accent and mimic a native perfectly is a trap. The authors argue that it puts you into the uncanny valley.
Like in animation where a robot looks almost perfectly human, but something is just slightly off and it gives you the creeps.
Exactly. If you achieve flawless technical pronunciation but you lack the lifelong cultural integration and the natural body language, you become what the book calls a language zombie.
A language zombie.
You are technically perfect, but you lack your own authentic identity. You aren't expressing yourself. You are impersonating someone else.
So you have the mechanics, but no soul.
The goal of learning the language as an adult is not to erase who you are. The book quotes Meryl Streep, arguably the greatest master of accents in film, who said, "To capture how someone speaks is to capture them." You do not want to capture a native speaker. You want to express you in a new medium.
I love that.
An accent is a history. It tells people that you have lived a life before this conversation. As long as you are intelligible, your accent is a deeply charming, authentic part of your identity.
Embrace the accent as proof of the life you've lived. I absolutely love that. So let's bring this all together for the listener. If you are sitting there right now thinking you are too old or your memory is too shot to learn a language, you need to throw that narrative away.
Throw it completely away.
You do not need to envy the toddler. You have the superpower of top-down processing. You have metacognition. You have the ability to intentionally build permastore memories using distributed practice. And you have the rich life experience to bring your authentic self into a brand new culture.
And beyond all the cultural and social benefits, I want to leave you with a profound piece of neurological evidence from the book. There is a landmark study from a memory clinic in Toronto that tracked patients developing Alzheimer's dementia.
Okay.
They discovered that for the patients who were bilingual, who actively used and managed two languages, the onset of Alzheimer's was delayed by an average of 4 years compared to monolingual patients.
4 years of cognitive protection just from the act of speaking another language.
Yes, think about what we discussed with the central executive. The constant, invisible mental juggling. The effort of inhibiting your English while you construct a sentence in Spanish, it builds immense cognitive reserve. It is a physical workout for the brain that literally creates armor against cognitive decline.
It is not just a hobby, it is a shield for your mind. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question. If learning a language can literally rewire your adult brain to delay disease, think about what it does to your identity.
Exactly.
When you step out of the uncanny valley, when you stop trying to be a language zombie and instead fuse your adult life experience with a completely new way of expressing the world, who will you become? How will your personality shift when you unlock this new version of yourself? The train hasn't left the station, the window isn't closed, you just have to decide to step through it.
Well said.
And if you are ready to start building those cognitive habits and explore this deeply practical approach to fluency, you can dive into the methods we discussed today by checking out jimmymello.com. Start using the tools you already have.